Welcome to the fourth and final of our first round of speed pitches with Adventure Together. Making this one a little more formal because it is the final one in the series for right now. I want to introduce Salpy, lead designer at Adventure Together, and Shaper, lead something. What do we got,
The
Shaper?
boss.
The boss. As well as 39, who will be presenting Plastic Beast tonight for his pitch. I want to thank everybody who's attended so far and who's watching these videos in the future. With that, I'm gonna let them take it away.
Okay. Hello there. My name is Isaac Philadelphia. I am the lead designer, well, the only designer behind Plastic Beasts. I'd like to thank Adventure Together for the opportunity to pitch my game. I'm really excited to show you what I have, so with no further ado, let's get into the first slide, which you have up there. Plastic Beasts is a TCG inspired by model kits, Lego, and Mecha. That's my major things. Players take the role of a head combat engineer whose job is to get the robots out on time with the right equipment attached and the right piloting. The game is a lot like a dance where the objective is to trip my opponent as much as possible. Speaking of the game can be next slide. Sorry. The game can be broken down into four major sections. We've got the build, the deploy, the attack, and the reload. The build, we focus on customization. That's a big thing for this game. This is the main brunt, is designing and building your robot army and kitting them out in a way that takes advantage of not only your strategy, but keeping your opponent off their strategy. When robots are done being built in their hangars, in their respective hangars, they go to the deploy phase. This is when they come out onto the field. This happens at the end of the turn to integrate the traditional summoning sickness mechanic, but also to just make the bottleneck for getting robots out onto the board a little bit more of a struggle for players. For the attack phase, our combat is not about if you take damage, but where you take that damage. Are you choosing to keep your facilities alive? Are you making sure that your robots are alive? What effects that your facilities are gifting you is really going to ensure that you can win the game. And then that moves to our final section, which is our reload. Redraw up to 5 cards. Now you got time to plan while your opponent is taking their turn, which helps with the cognitive load. And speaking of the reload, next slide, that's one of our major unique selling points. Your hand is not only your literal resource, but it's also a tertiary resource and is the pieces that you're going to use to win the game. Which is incredibly different from a lot of games that even use the hand refill engine. We see with, and then on top of that, we have our logistics puzzle. Because of how robots get deployed onto the field and the building process behind them, the game kind of has this natural bottleneck that you're working with to kind of make sure that your robots are getting out and you're fighting your opponent on equal footing or on an advantageous footing, if you will. And then lastly, our facilities are a dynamic health pool. They are a resource that can be swapped out and changed and slightly modified to make both attacking them unique and defending them unique in their own way. Which leads me to my next point. The main focus, and our next slide, sorry. Our main target audience right now is players ages 13 plus. We're looking for model kit, Lego, and miniature fans. We're looking for mecha fans, and we're looking for players interested in a little bit more of a complex strategy. We're seeing that collectibles, especially nowadays, are becoming a really big sector, especially model kits with the newest show that Gundam is coming out, and we also see just in general a lot more Chinese model kits and off-brand model kits coming into the fray. We're also seeing mecha in general is getting a lot more pop culture identification compared to the years prior, which goes to our next slide. right now, there aren't that many mecha games that kind of speak to just a pure mecha fan. Battletech is the biggest one out there, and that game has a lot of complexity. And while significantly big, we see, especially recently, a lot of slowdown in their market growth. And I think that's partially due to the complexity of the game and the difficulty of getting the natural space necessary to play traditional board game uh, like BattleTech is, even though it utilizes a hex grid. We see that mecha is prevalent, but it's again not its own standalone project. We see them in Warhammer 40k, we see them in Magic the Gathering, we see them in Yu-Gi-Oh, but they're not the kind of sole image that we see, like the main thing that we're working with. Um, the Gundam TCG is the only thing really coming on the horizon, but in my personal opinion, Bandai is almost saturated in the card game market. They have 4 or 5 projects that we're working with, and we just saw them shut down Battle Spirit, which shows that even though this game might very well just be another one of their failed experiments that just don't work. And we've seen them try Gundam before in the United States, and it has not ended well. Again, mecha games are very cantankerous. They can be difficult. A lot of them have a tendency to be overly complex, and that I think is what turns off a lot of people from actually exploring this for a reason, which is why we're targeting those kinds of enthusiasts. We're hoping that we can slide into that space where people want something that kind of can chew on and work with, but are not willing to work in such a high complexity space like Battletech provides. Next slide. So getting to our distribution methods, we're really looking at an idea of a blind box. So in essence, we're thinking of a model kit that we can integrate with the traditional TCG distribution of booster packs and booster packs and main structure decks. The examples here are from a company called Blockies in China that are producing small, easy to construct, hidden box, blind box, excuse me, model kits. So, and because plastic is becoming a little bit more expensive in the coming years, especially with environmentalism becoming more important, there was a idea that I had about utilizing a more paper designed model kit that we can include instead of a traditional plastic model kits. But Adventure Together and their tooling might provide a better space in a traditional uh, model kit style. And that is all. Last slide. Thank you, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. It was Isaac, right?
Yes.
All right, Isaac, thanks so much. I appreciate it. So before I dive into some questions, sure, Tony will have some as well. I just would love to hear if you have any questions for us as a publisher or anything that you came into this pitch thinking you definitely wanted to ask us about, or in the publishing process in general, or anything that's specifically related to your game and publishing that we can help answer right out of the gate.
Yeah. So I wanted to understand, like, how are you manufacturing your hex pieces currently?
Yes. So we have an OEM. We're not going through any known manufacturer in our industry. We actually put together the pieces of that manufacturing process using a founder in the company who had connections in China. They're being made in Shenzhen. They are tooled, injection molded plastic parts, which are then sent to a very local UV print vendor who then applies the UV print to the surface of the hexes and tiles and then packages. And then it's sent back and then it's packaged from there. That's typically how they're made. So it's injection molding, it's ABS plastic, and then UV printing is the application process for the artwork and the biomes. Does that answer your question, or were you
Yes.
thinking a different angle? Okay.
My next question. Oh, sorry. You were gonna say?
No, that's all.
Okay. I want to ask. Are you willing or interested in looking into producing things besides just your hex pieces currently, or
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first games we launched alongside of Source and the Hex and Tile system was Time Strike, and it came with
Mhm.
21 miniatures. Each one of those miniatures are tooled, and they're also modular, so the miniatures do stack with one another. So they were designed to enable a small miniature to jump onto a medium-sized miniature or onto a large-sized miniature, and we have combat occurring on the back of a giant world boss that sort of sits in the middle of the map. So we have definitely expanded into different types of tooling. Something like this that you're proposing wouldn't be outside of our wheelhouse. We absolutely love working with 3D models, and we have lots of engineers at the company. We have 3 at the moment. So we have a lot of experience and background in manufacturing, tooling, and engineering of products.
okay. What attracted you to Plastic Beast specifically?
So what attracted me to Plastic Beast specifically? Well, it was a good sales sheet. It was visually appealing, and I really liked the idea of the modular, um, you know, Gundam type units. I think that something that I really enjoyed and saw the launch of that was very successful. I'm forgetting the name of it, so forgive me, but it was like a build your own ship game that was just played with cards. If anyone knows, you can jump in and remind me of what it was. But it was basically, modular parts, sort of like Legos. You built your own spaceship, and then you battled your spaceships. If any one part of the spaceship got attacked, there was a card that represented that part, and you could then signal that it had been damaged. Does anyone remember what the name of this was? Tony, we talked about it. Do you remember?
Yeah, Mesa Games did the trailer for him, right?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
flip
Trying to
ships
look
or
it up
something
real
like
quick.
that.
That
I don't remember.
sounds right. Just looking on his
Pirates of the
website.
Spanish Main?
No, it was not naval ships, but spaceships.
Oh, Snapships.
Snapships. That's right. So
Yeah.
snapships. Snapchat had a really successful launch, and I was really interested in that product. So when I did see yours, my mind instantly jumped to interesting. And I agree with your sort of market data here that there is a trend towards sort of building your own thing and then playing with it. And Snapships jumped to mind when I saw this, and I thought, oh, okay, interesting. I know that was really successful, and people really like that kind of stuff. And obviously, we built a modular, stackable hex-based system, and we love engineering challenges, but we love to build things. I mean, it's one of our favorite things to do in our games. So that's what drew me to it.
Right. Well, thank you. That's all the questions I have right now.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I have some questions right out of the gate.
Okay.
Then I'll hand it off to Tony to ask a few. But my questions out of the gate are I still don't really understand how to play it. How
I
how exactly
agree. I
does
agree.
yeah,
Okay.
like can you explain to me how like let's say a turn goes?
Absolutely. If we can go back to the gameplay section, I kind of sped through that. My apologies. Um, yeah. So players start off with their hand already filled to 5 cards. We've got 3 hangers that we can place robots into, and then we can play robot cards to any one of those zones, or we can pitch cards from our hand to a discard in order to play them out. Play out cards from our hand. But robots specifically have the bespoke hanger zone. When a robot enters the hanger zone, they come with a timer, which is equal to their cost, and each turn that timer will go down by 1 automatically. Um, when
But
that
Do you have
robot
to
hits 0,
track? Do you have to track the timers individually for the different robots that are sitting in the different hangars?
correct.
Okay, and then you said you discard a card to use a robot. It's almost like their ammunition is your discard.
So the way it works, it's a little complicated, but the way it works is that you discard cards from your hand, and that can either give you more resources for your robot, which reduces the amount of time, or for alternate cards, pilots, tactics, those 2 card types, you can pitch cards from your hand in order to play them out and activate their effect. So your hand is more of a kind of like an additional timer, like a resource, like workers basically. You can discard a number of workers from your hand, and that will increase the amount of time that increase the amount of work that's been done on your robot.
Okay. So in front of me, besides what's in my hand, I have. Do you treat it as like 3 lanes? Is that what the hangars are?
Well,
And
there
then
are
the
3
lanes are fighting
bespoke
each
zones.
other.
No, not like that. So there are 3 zones in the hangar, and each one of them supports 1 robot. So you can only have up to 3 in the hangar at any given time, and then when something deploys, that zone becomes free for you to use again.
Okay.
I'm also
If
going
we
to
look,
share. I'm going to share the sales seat, Tony, in the chat so that you can see it. I think it will help. Give
Is there images of like the layout?
somewhat some of the components for sure, and,
Yeah.
and more of a detailed explanation.
Oh,
of
okay.
the
Yeah,
phases.
this helps.
sorry about that.
Oh,
No.
good.
Okay, so that's helpful. In terms of building the mechas, at what stage are you guys? Like, I see this picture in the background of what looks like a very, very well designed toy. Is this a Gundam, to use as an example? Do you guys
Yeah.
have the models built yet? What was the strategy and approach? How many pieces do you think you'd need? How many models in total? What's the sort of approach? And do you have a mechanism for which you're thinking about how these would be sort of customizable and modular? Or is that all work that needs to be done?
That's all work that needs to be done. Right now,
So it's all just cards right now, right?
It's all cards right now.
Okay.
Now, is the artwork on the card done to the degree where a 3D modeler could take the artwork and translate it easily? Or
So
is there still a lot of like engineering thought that needs to go into, hey, here's this part, and then also let's break it down and think about how it goes together?
right now, the art that we're using, we're very early in development.
Okay.
I am very early in development. The art that we have right now is from a Lego designer by the name of Mogo Brick Laboratory. He's pretty famous on YouTube for his Lego designs. But for right now, tooling that kind of question is a little bit further into the game's development.
Okay, and the artist whose art you're using for it, is he part of the project, or are you just using
No,
his art
he's
because
not.
it's a great example? Got it. Okay. All right. So the idea is basically to use a very similar approach to other known creators that you've seen out there, and then looking at Gundam as a model for how you kind of want it to look when it's done.
Correct.
Okay. Well, the good news is 3D modeling is more accessible and affordable than it's ever been. There's a lot of really great softwares and tools that are coming into play now that are kind of changing the game and how that all works. But it is still quite a massive undertaking. I mean, even to get one of them done, and then done to the point where we could tool it as separate parts, potentially using separate colors. What's the vision that you have for getting? So, okay, this is kind of my area of expertise. Spend a lot of time 3D modeling and building things and miniatures and tooling. So I'll ask some questions. If you don't know the answer, totally fine. Just want to dig as deep as we can get here. Is the vision here that you'd be able to take, like, let's say the arm from one mech and put it onto the base of any mech?
That's the idea. The idea is that you'd have a base endoskeleton that you'd be working on, and then pieces would be attached to that endoskeleton.
Okay, cool. How many parts do you see total on a given mech? Head, arms, endoskeleton, legs.
Yeah,
Gun on the back,
5
gun on
limbs
the
and
arm. Okay.
Yeah, 5 limbs. So you'd have, if you double up everything, so you could place and put them all together because you're tooling this onto a skeleton, it would be probably 10 pieces total, give or take, excusing things like shoulder pads, kneecaps, that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's not bad. Obviously, I built a lot of Warhammer armies, and so 10 is totally achievable. I think from the building point of view, like from the player experience point of view, from the point of view of modeling and figuring that all out, not impossibly hard, but you'd have to stick with the same scale. Do you have would it be problematic if they're all roughly the same size? Like,
No,
the
that'd be
torsos?
perfectly fine.
Yeah, they'd have to kind of all be the same size. And then what's the overall scale in millimeters that you are targeting for like a fully completed mech?
I don't have millimeters, but about 4 inches, maybe smaller than that.
About 4 inches. Okay, got it. So like, I'm trying to think what we
It's
compare that to.
101 millimeters.
100
Yeah.
millimeters. Okay, so that's roughly the size of our sentients, give or take. So they're pretty big in terms of height, but I imagine they'd probably be a lot less wide. That helps give me a frame of reference for like thinking about the pricing on this. I think,
Right.
and this is
When you
actually
play it, when you play it, how many mechs are you going to have in front of you during a game?
It's dependent on what ends up coming out of the hangar, really. On average, I see about 4 or 5 units on board at a given moment.
Okay.
And how many playtests have you done, and what are you using right now for parts and components to like validate the experience with players?
Uh, we've been mostly using just the fundamental cards. The distribution, the suggestion of having a traditional collectible was more as a way to entice individuals and like a value proposition to differentiate the card game from the rest of the market.
No,
It,
100%. And I think because I'm interested in it, I want to know more. I think that you're
okay.
not wrong in thinking that that would be a useful tool to draw people to it. It would definitely give it a lot of table presence. And then to my earlier point, like yeah, I saw your sales sheet and I thought, oh, snap ships, cool opportunity. I haven't seen anyone approach it from this angle, so that's kind of why I'm drilling into the details a bit, because that gets my wheels turning. Um, I like modular things. I like minis a lot. And I do think they definitely help sell a product if done right. The how many have you kind of thought about what would come in a base box of this
So
with
right
or
now,
without minis?
okay. So the main way I'm thinking of early distribution, like for someone to start out, is the traditional starter deck that we see in TCG distribution, or the structured deck, the pre-con. Um, are you at all familiar with Bakugan by any chance?
Yes.
Yeah. So when they attempted their TCG, they launched with the product with a deck and then 3 of the models, or Bakugan, if you will. I would think something along those lines, and maybe a slightly larger model or more unique models that are submodels that you could use. Say, for instance, instead of having every single booster packets and every single uh, structure deck coming with their own bespoke, fancy model kit, each model could be something as simple as a gun or something like that, where you're talking about 2 or 3. Have a good night, JC. 2 or 3 uh, pieces total that we're placing into a box, and um, then you can lower that construction cost across multiple booster packs. Um, but the way I'm thinking about it is you start off with like a main starter kit that comes with structured deck, pre-con, all the cards you need, a play mat, a rule book, that kind of thing. And then you also have your model kit, which would be maybe a slightly higher model kit, maybe multiple model kits, that kind of thing, that you could add in addition to the pieces.
Got it. Okay, so each part would be collectible more or less down to
Right.
the arm or head, and you'd buy them kind of bit by bit and assemble as you want. And they come with the cards, obviously.
Mhm.
Okay, so a couple of thoughts just from a production point of view is that this would be a massive upfront cost, and I think
Yeah.
um, one of the largest challenges, not that it's not insurmountable, but one of the largest challenges is going to be getting the quantity that you need if you're selling them as individual parts, right? Like selling them as one giant mech that then could be broken apart would be easier. When you get to the stage of manufacturing, typically, like if you're saying like, okay, I need an arm in a box, they're going to give you a minimum quantity. It'll probably be about 500. And so let's say you were to crowdfund a game like this, and you offered all those different parts as separately sold, and you sold 600 of this one body that everybody wanted, and you sold 200 of this one arm and whatever, and then only 2 people wanted this one type of leg. No matter what, you
Right.
still have to make 500 of that one type of leg. So you end up spending a lot more, and you'd have to probably you have to bake that into into the price point that you choose. And so it could be a really challenging approach to try and sell them part by part. I get why you'd want to, um, but I think what I'm going to come back to is the gameplay on this would have to be so tight that a publisher would be willing to go, yep, that justifies a very extreme upfront cost, not only for the tooling, but in terms of then how we sell them and how we handle those quantities. So for me, after hearing the pitch and even after reading the sales sheet, I'm still really curious to understand how it plays. And I'm not sure I fully grasp it yet. Tony, since you just read the sales sheet through, do you have a better concept of how it plays at the moment? Because I think that's what my questions are right now is what is the most, like, what's the core experience here? Not, I get the thematics of it, like you're building in a hangar and you're deploying mechs and you're battling the mechs against other players. But what's the sort of like core experience that a player's having while they're going through the process of doing that? This is where I'd like to learn more, understand better.
Yeah, it's not exactly clear. My understanding of it right now is essentially you're just trying to guess how the other player is going to play their cards, so that I guess you can counter them like 1 to 2 to 3 turns before you're placing mechs down that will deploy after X amount of rounds, but you can use pilots to like fast track it, which may be one of the ways you could outplay your opponent, because they might expect it 3 rounds, but it goes down to 1 round or 2 rounds. But it's not. Damn it. Do they have like a life pool, the enemy?
Yeah, so each of the facilities, I think that's maybe where the confusions come in. The facilities are sort of separated. Are you familiar with the concept of shields by any chance? Like in, say,
Shields?
yeah, shields, like in Duel Masters or Digimon or anything like that?
I'm not, no.
Okay, so the idea is that instead of having a traditional number pool that you're working with, you instead have these segregated bodies that act as your health. Each body then has, in this example, in this game, a health bar attached to them. So, yeah. So each facility has a health. They have an effect that they're doing when they're active, which basically means when they're flipped up, which is when they're revealed or attacked at. And then that effect influences the rest of the game until that card is removed from being destroyed, from having its life reduced to 0. So the robot's objective is to destroy as many of the facilities as possible and to ensure that the effects that the opponent gains from them being flipped face up are reduced as much as physically possible by attacking your opponent, by destroying those facilities.
All right, and as far as the mechs, I know beforehand what components and things each of my mechs are going to have, or am I placing down a core and then as I'm playing, I'm actually attaching the different pieces that I'm playing for that mech?
Right. So in the example on the example in the sell sheet, there's a robot there. I believe it's called a constructor. There's a main effect box and then there's a sub effect box. Your main effect is the core, what you place down into the hanger, and then sub effects can be slid under as additional effects. So those sub effects are the equipment, and those are the things you're attaching to your robot. The core
And you're
robot that you're
attaching
building.
them in the middle of the game.
Right. So
So
while
they
the
would need
robot's
to
in the hanger.
be whatever these modular components would need to be highly reusable, because you're constantly taking parts off and on while you're playing, then easily put together, because you don't want to be fiddling with them constantly when you're in the middle of a game. You want it to just kind of snap in real quick and be able to
Right.
snap 1,000,000 times without wear, because you're playing with it.
That's just saying there could be definitely a strong argument for magnets as opposed to friction based.
Yeah, if that's the case.
Or
Yeah, I would agree.
we have to use a very strong ABS type plastic, which again, we have experience working with. It's not the simplest thing to use for parts like this. Typically, at least in board games, you're going to want to push you towards a PVC or like a PETG because it's cheaper, but they break. So like if you look at Lego, Lego's so robust because it's made out of ABS, and so those parts can snap and unsnap and unsnap, and it's no problem. So I think the approach here would probably, you probably want to pick a strong type of plastic if you're going to go with a actual mating part, or defer to a cheaper PVC and then just have them put magnets in there, and strong magnets that don't die over time, because that would be tragic if you collected a whole bunch and then they stopped connecting. But I think magnets are obviously the lowest amount of effort to attach. And ABS would definitely for sure be the most durable long term. Anyway, lots of different thoughts around how you make.
Now, I'm going to speak from my own kind of mind as far as where I could see potential. Once I'd like to definitely play test it and see what the feeling is like. And I think that if we could really enjoy what you have as far as the card game, and then you have the mechs out on the board, I feel like you're already setting yourself up to battle those mechs in a 3D world, not just kind of like on a card mat. I know that's not your intention, but when
you'd
you're
be
doing,
looking towards something along the lines of like a source-based engine in that case.
yeah, well, I'm saying there's always a potential for it, right? If you're selling these, because they're rather large minis, if you're selling these large minis to go along with the card game, and you're building them in the middle of the game and you're messing with them, and I don't know if you can like shoot off someone's attachment or stuff like that. There's always that opportunity as well, to pivot to that direction. But yeah, be very interested to play test the actual just the game itself with the cards. And the mini building is the mini building. I don't know if it serves a purpose besides just more like kind of enticement of looking at the game and watching it, and for people that like having those pieces kind of like fight, even though they're kind of just sitting across from each other.
So so I have a couple questions to bring it sort of back, rein it in, because I think Tony and I could probably talk about three-dimensionality and minis and how we bring that to bear and merge it with the game. But for the sake of the pitch, I want to come back to that and ask you a couple of really high-level questions. The first is, when players are done, what do they typically say? Hey, this is what I loved most about this game. And then when players are done, what do they typically say? Hey, I hated this. This was my least favorite part at its current stage.
At its current stage, right now people are really liking the deployment mechanic, the equip mechanic, and those kinds of things. Those are the most fun. People really like the yeah, that's the main thing they're enjoying. The things they're not enjoying so far are the combat, which I've been working on and tweaking here and there to kind of get to a point that I'm happy and they're happy with.
How is it working today, and what do you think the problem is?
Right now, it's very simple right now. So we're doing single number comparison, and the issue that was happening is that people didn't have blockers. That was the main thing. Because I was using blocker as a keyword, and that seemed to people didn't seem to enjoy that very much, because it results in a zone where if you don't have a blocker, you're not really doing anything or engaging your opponent's turn as much. So I added blockers back without the traditional retaliation. Basically, they're not attacking back, they're simply taking damage, and that seems to have changed and modified the game into a methodical war game, which I'm more interested in pursuing.
And how's damage being tracked right now?
Right now, damage is being tracked by small pieces, or with die.
Okay, cool.
What's the typical health? of a unit?
The typical health of a unit is about 4 power. Power integrates both attack and defense.
Okay. Um, I think I gave this advice to almost everybody we talked to except one during the pitch event, and that is, would love it if you, and I think it would really help your pitch to have some form of GIF that just shows the game, even no matter how early the prototype is, and basically could illustrate very quickly to someone, hey, here's how turn flows. Here's generally the objective. Here are the components that are involved in the game. I think that would go a really long way in helping somebody grab onto that concept very quickly because I think as a publisher, the quicker I can grab the concept, the quicker I can then jump to thinking about the marketability of the game and what the potential might be to work together. And then we could spend less time trying to, communicate back and forth about, intellectually kind of how the game plays and just
Right.
see it. So I think a visual aid that really kind of do that using real parts if you have them, or digital parts if you don't, like a TTS type walkthrough, would be one of the most effective tools you have to just get that across as soon as possible. So then we could transition the conversation into thinking about, okay, where does this fit in the market, and asking questions more about player experience, how far along you are, kind of what your vision is for the game in general. That would be my number one piece of feedback on the pitch itself. The sales sheet looks great. It was beautiful. It really attracted me to it. I think that the idea that you're pursuing is a strong idea. I think you're right about the market. And I think there's a big opportunity there. I think I often used to say this to our team when we were building Source, which is that good ideas don't exist in a vacuum. There's someone else trying to do the exact same thing as you right now.
Mhm.
And that's not always, and that you mentioned it yourself. So I would say important that you try to move as fast as you can to progress the game forward, knowing that there is going to be competition in the marketplace because a good idea occurs to a lot of people all at once,
Right.
typically. And it ends up being the person who can move most swiftly on it that's going to go ahead and capture it, and the market and the hype behind it. So I think you're definitely onto something. Um, I I do think that it is going to be a large upfront cost, no matter what. If you're going down the tooling route, if you're going just the card game route, and maybe there's an opportunity for you to like launch the card game first, and then have it be sort of, I don't know, a backup or a second campaign. There's a lot of different ways you might think about it. But I think that the person who's actually going to end up winning this market, I think you're right, is going to come out with both at the
Mhm.
same time. I think they're going to sit there and bide their time and get it right, and come out with a very big launch, and that's going to be the most effective versus trying to sort of like one stage at a time walk your way into the market of like, here's a card game and it's really cool and it has max, but then we want to do these things and we'll do them later. So I think you're definitely thinking and headed in the right direction. I don't think you're wrong about the market at all. For me, whether or not, as a publisher, for me, whether or not this investment is worthwhile to make would come down to, is the gameplay tight? And that's why I think this pitch absolutely must start with, here's exactly what's involved in the gameplay. Here's an overview of the components involved, so that then you can get right to, okay, that seems like a really tight experience, that's well thought out and would be fun and is novel in and of itself, and therefore justifies this larger investment in making all these different parts and pieces, because the tooling's going to be very significant. Um,
Mhm.
I think you're looking in upwards of $100,000 to start tooling the Snap-on mechs just for like a first base box. If you're approaching it the way you're thinking about approaching it now, which is part for part, and sold separately. So that's gonna be a big upfront commitment, and I think you're gonna need a publisher willing to take a really big risk, and they're gonna do that only if they're like super sold on the game and
Mhm.
how it plays. So that's why I come back to that. I think that's the most critical. The other thing I think, would be advice I'd give to everyone who pitched to us, was I'd love to know more about you and why you're building this. I didn't even spend a lot of time in the last couple of pitches asking about it, but I think the authenticity behind a game and how it's built and the person who's building it and why they're building it, and why they're passionate about it is pretty important. So it'd be great, to include something in here that kind of talks about you and why you are the right person to build this particular game. Right. I
Right.
Yeah, what
love
did you
mechs. I
set
love
out?
mechs. Since I was 2 years old, and I knew I could do this. Right. Like, what's the yeah. Sorry, Tony, you were saying something.
I was just saying, like, what was the thought that you're like, I want to build this kind of game? Like, what was, are you still at the point of what you were setting out to create, or has it shifted over time? Like, yeah, it's kind of just going back to what inspired you to kind of like what was the goal for the other, for everybody to experience while they're playing through this game. Yep.
Yeah, I think that I think one commonly overlooked thing, whether you're raising money or you're trying to sell a thing, is storytelling. Like, a lot of people forget that it's important. I think as designers and or engineers or product people, like you're very focused on the features and stuff of what you've designed and how it works and what makes it novel. And that's really important. I'm not saying it's not, but to tell a story about how you got here and why you're on the journey and why I can trust that you're going to continue on it because of what it means to you. Trying to have that come across at some point in the pitch, I think would be really, really valuable as well, to help us kind of it endears the listener a little bit and helps them believe that the idea can become reality. So that would be my little bit of feedback on the pitch, high level. So with that, I'd love it if you could share with us a little bit why are you building this?
Okay. Okay. Since I was a kid, I really liked aviation, specifically spacecraft. I'm a huge fan of mechanics. I'm a huge fan of mechanical. If you go to the last page, I'm studying at the University of Memphis right now to do mechanical engineering specifically so I can go into aerospace. That's the hope. That's the dream. And so Mecha sort of just fell into my lap when I was really young. I think I was watching. I remember this loosely. I watched the entirety of Gundam Seed in a day on my mother's really old Toshiba laptop, and I was just absolutely enthralled by it. The only thing I ate was a peanut butter and cheese sandwich. That was all I ate for that whole day, because that was just that enthralled about the giant robots. And since then, I went on to, as I got more familiar with the science and as I got more familiar with the technology, I realized that it just doesn't make sense to make this real, but that the fantasy of it is still enjoyable for me. And a show came out in the early 2010, 2013. It was Gundam Build Fighters. The whole pitch of that was that they're playing with the Gunpla or the model kits as they are. And I thought that is a fascinating idea. They should explore this more. And they did nothing with it. They made a few other stories. They made some video games. But that was it. And now I'm seeing them come out with this project, which is another run-of-the-mill card game that I'm just not interested in. And I'm thinking, why isn't there a mech game where I get to customize and build my own robot army and just deploy it? And just have fun with that. Nothing on the market that does that. Nothing on the market that's easy to understand. And most of the mech games that I see coming out are, let me do my robot versus your robot, or this technically robots, but it's really just adjacent. There just wasn't the kind of fun physicality to any of it.
Yep.
And that's what I felt was missing. And so I started this game with the objective of, hey, I want to build a mech card game. I want to have the ability to build my own robot and have them fight. And that was what I was working on. And I've been working on this for on and on for 1 or 2 years, and it's just been, this idea has been something I've been banging my head against for a long time, because I'm just fascinated by it. And I think the market doesn't apply to it. The market isn't interested in it. And it's just not serviced at all. I mean, we didn't get a mech video game until very recently that was any good, and that was Armored Core 7.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm interested. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fantastic. So a little background on me is I work in aerospace. I'm an industrial designer. So very cool that you're pursuing something similar. And obviously a lot of actually all the engineers on our team are aerospace engineers. One works at SpaceX, another worked with me on a low Earth orbit satellite constellation. So we probably have a lot to chat about and some cool stories to share back and forth. So that's pretty cool. I love space myself. Frankly, it sounds like it's a mixture of nostalgia seeing the industry miss opportunities, and then wanting an experience that doesn't exist in the world. And I think those are probably the three best ingredients that you need to go ahead and build a game. It doesn't sound too dissimilar from our journey, does it, Tony? Um, so I think those are all great reasons, and it inspires me, and I'm confident that you'll probably do it for those reasons. So I think you definitely share that in the pitch. I think it matters. The last thing I'll say is, have you been building the solo for the past 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, for the most part.
You're going to need a team. You're going to need a team to help you with this. I mean, I can't say it enough. It's probably the most important thing. It's that what you have is a big vision, and I can tell you're a big thinker. And I think you should get some co-collaborators. I think it's going to be really important. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. You should find some other designers to come in and try and help you with this, and flex the muscle of trying to inspire somebody else to kind of come along on the journey with you. Because if you get this completed, and if it gets to a point where you should invest the money and get all the tooling done and do a big massive launch for this, it's not going to be achievable alone. I would stress that more than anything, more than any piece of advice I give you, is find a co-collaborator who's like equally invested in the success of it alongside of you. I think that's going to be pretty vital. But anyway, those are all my thoughts off the top of my head. Thank you so much for sharing the background on it. Tony, do you have anything else you want to add?
I guess I had one more question about the physicality of the mech and tying it into the play rounds. So if I deploy a mech into a hangar, what piece of the mech am I starting with? Is it like I just lay down a core on the table, and then is it throughout the different turns? I'm like, okay, the next turn I attach the legs. The next turn I attach the arms and the gun. Or is it kind of like your mech is just built, you place it in, and then you add that one attachment thing? Because you'd said that you're approaching this as you're a combat engineer whose job is to deploy robots, and I think the closest thing this speaks to me is Zoids. If you've ever watched that show back in the day. But yeah, is that like the intent? Like you're going from like piece by piece, and then you like over the rounds, you're seeing like mechs almost being completely built in their combat hangars, and then like is that meant to be part of the experience? Is actually watching them build up?
Right now in this version, no. The kind of idea is that they're built. They just need some time to get ready. I guess this is an aerospace reference. If you've ever seen an F-15 scramble, it's usually about 10 to 15 minutes of people getting stuff ready, making sure all the pins are in the right spots, making sure the equipment's right, the right weapons are on the sortie, and that's when you're launching. That's kind of where we're starting from.
I think.
Okay. Yeah, that's more like Zoids. Like the main thing's there, and sometimes they'll add a separate attachment right before they go into battle, which is kind of what it sounded like with your piece. So okay.
I would. Do you know anyone at your college right now in the
Yeah,
field
so
who might want to help do this?
I run a small club at the university called Hobbies Unite, which is focused on model kit building, Lego, Gunpla, and we also have we're starting some card games, some video games, and we have an event coming next week for I think a Commander and a Smash tournament that we're running. So
okay, yeah, I would actually say that because I think you're right that to launch this you'd want to bring in this element of the building. I think it's pretty critical, and also I think you're right. That's the biggest opportunity. That you should get something, even if it's super simple. You're an engineer, engineers, that you can physically test the mechs. Even if they look like just silly blocks, right? Test out that physicality element and play test that and see if it requires more spatial environmental elements to make it feel good, or if it could be done with a playmat, or exactly how they might move around the battlefield. Maybe you've done this already. Correct me if you have, but if you haven't, I would say that's probably the next and most important challenge, so that then you can start to take those sort of like videos and turn them into GIFs of, hey, here's the fleshed out concept and the final end experience. I always say to people when we're talking about board games is what I love most about this industry is you are selling an experience in a box, right? That's what it is. It's a box that someone's going to open up and have an experience without you there. So I think that that's the core of this is like, can you create a really awesome experience where you're doing all these things together at once? And is that tactile nature something that's really adding a lot to it, or is it detracting from what was just fun as a card game? Those are the things I'd be most curious to see how that actually looks, and then to hear about how players would say that it feels, once they've done it, between the playing the cards and the snapping together of the parts, and how much value that adds to the overall experience. Because I do think it's going to have to be pretty key, uh, again, to justify that upfront cost. So, for instance, when we built Time Strike, like we knew it was going to be this big miniatures game, and I was like, but what's going to make our miniatures different and or better, or why is that tactile? Why is it going to be interesting? And that's when we came up with the sort of miniatures that could climb up on one another, and you could combine them, and you can get on the boss's back and have a fight on his back while you're fighting him. And that all evolved from this idea of like, well, we're going to spend so much money on tooling these things. We should probably do something to make them stand out, or something that's unique or novel that no one's ever done before, and that adds to the fun of the game and doesn't take away from. So that's let's say the challenge that I'd put on this particular game. I would love to see that even in the simplest form, just a photo of what that might look like, and then what the experience is using it.
All right, I'll certainly get back to you on that. No, I haven't tested the physicality element. Um,
But
yeah,
apart from that, and we should probably wrap it up. I want to play whatever you have available. Do you have the card game on PTS?
yes, I
Okay, awesome. I think we should follow up, because I'd absolutely love to jump in and give a shot and give the card game a shot, so we can give you some feedback on that and just keep the discussion going. I think you're trying to undertake something massive. Is what I'm saying. Of all the games, this appears to be the most ambitious in terms of its product scope. So that's why I say definitely find a co-collaborator, somebody who's nearby, preferably, so you guys can get together often. Because there's gonna be a lot of kinks to work out to get this to a place where I think it's gonna be ready to publish. Or at least the place where a publisher is going to go, I'm willing to take the financial risk to take it the rest of the way, because there's such a strong core experience that I can see and feel and understand that's right here, that justifies it. So like, as a publisher, like I said, we have the engineers, we do the 3D modeling. We could easily jump in and become a co-collaborator on a project to this scale. But first, I'd need to be convinced that the game concept behind it and how it actually feels to play it, is there enough that we can pick it up from there and start to do that work, because it's a lot. It'd be a lot of very involved work, to start making the mechs.
right.
But anyway,
Okay.
those are my thoughts top level, and I think kudos to you for doing something ambitious. I always love ambitious projects and people trying to really do something big. And to your market data and your point at the start, yeah, this is a very big market opportunity. It has to be done right. As you know, because you're so dissatisfied with all the people who fallen on their
Yeah.
face trying. It has to be done right, and so it's going to be a lot of work.
All right.
And I'll add one last piece. Just as we've kind of been going through our own journey, for whatever reason, recently I've been thinking about what, because I think right at the start of your pitch you talked a bit about BattleTech, and I think that most everything you said was right. And I've been thinking about what if there was an opportunity to kind of take on that space. So it's I just think it's a coincidence that this was the first one I got to sit in on, because I'd love to tackle that space. I think there is still a market available for a new take on it, and possibly something to take it over. And yeah, I like it. But yeah, I definitely want to play.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be happy to do that test. Yes, there's a market. The question I guess right now is what does, and I know this is a weird thing to do, but what does Bandai end up doing in that market? Because they're going to introduce their miniature game and they're going to introduce their TCG. And
When you say miniature game, what does the miniature game play on?
A hex grid.
Okay. All right.
Um,
So it's something to watch. See what they do.
mhm.
Sorry, we like trying to tackle giants. It's fun. We'll see what they do. I mean, a lot. As you alluded to earlier in the presentation, a lot of these guys just kind of mess it up because they're looking to do a quick money grab on a known IP, and it falls on its face. So, yeah, keep an eye on it. I'd say keep working. Because the odds of that happening are pretty high.
Yeah.
So, this was awesome. Thank you, Isaac, for sharing it with us.
No problem.
I got to run, but we'll follow up. I believe this is the last pitch. Okay, great. So this is the last pitch. So we'll be following up with everybody that pitched to us already to find a good time to play test. And thank you to everyone, and thank you to Pat, most of all, for organizing it, and for everyone for the great pitches. I can tell you all put a lot of time and thought into it, and I appreciate that a lot.
Thank you so much to the Adventure Together team for all you've done for this event. Thank you to all the participants who pitched. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Shaper, sync back up with me. I'd love to talk more about continuing this event in the future.
Oh, 100%. We're down for it, and I think there's a lot of cool ideas and things we could do to make it even better next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope everyone has a wonderful night.
All right, take care.
Good night, everyone.
All right, have a good one.